Vault number 22 is Mark Murray. Mark was born on the Darling Downs and played his junior football with the Melbourne Rams. Making his Origin debut in 1981, Mark went on to play 15 games for Queensland, missing one game in a 6-year span. Mark toured PNG and England with Queensland in 1983 and was a member of the Maroons team to play New Zealand at Lang Park in 1982. A member of the 1982 Invincibles, Mark played 7 tests for Australia, winning all 7. In 1980, Mark Murray captained the North Devils to premiership success under future Queensland coach Graham Lowe. He then went on to coach the club to another grand final win in 1988. Mark coached Eastern Suburbs and the Melbourne Storm in the NRL. An eye injury cut his playing career short in 1986 at the age of just 27.
Mark Murray, thanks for your time today. What does it mean to you to be a fog?
Well, I grew up in Melbourne on the Western Downs and played in the Toowoomba competition as a junior and watched the ABC Match of the Day, and never, as a kid, never never thought I'd be, living in Brisbane and playing, BRL football and representative football. I came down on a bus as a 14-year-old to play Toowoomba versus Brisbane rep stuff, and as a curtain raiser for one of the major games here. And I still, when the bus pulled up in Castle Main Street, I remember the kangaroo and the queue sit above the door, entrance into Lang Park, and I just wanted to play for Queensland. That emblem that represented at Lang Park, down in the big smoke, being a country kid. And I actually played Queensland under-18s and 2 years Queensland schoolboys. We never beat them. But then to come in and play at BRL level for Norths initially, and then Valleys with Wally, and end up in the rep side and playing Origin, which was only conceived while I was down here through Ron McAuliffe's masterstroke. It was special. It was something I dreamt of as a kid, and the game's been very kind to me.
Take us back to those early days in Melbourne on the Darling Downs. What was it like growing up there? What was the early life of Mark Murray like?
Well, it was football in the winter and cricket in the summer. There was much else to do in the country, and apart from my dad was a timber carrier, so I'd go with him to work. We'd fall timber, snig logs, load timber and cart it to the local sawmill. So I did a lot of that as a kid. Driving a tractor at 12 and snigging logs, and it was a great environment to grow up in. But I always had a love of sport, and I played footy in the winter, and I played when I was under, I'd always play upgrades to because we were always short of numbers. And in the summer I'd play junior cricket, and if the men were short on the Saturday and the Sunday, I'd go and play with the seniors make up the numbers for them. So I was always enjoyed playing sport.
Did Brisbane seem a long way away? Or
yes, yeah, Toowoomba was the big smoke for us. It was an hour's drive into Toowoomba, which I got a love of Toowoomba. I love it. It's a great city, Brisbane just was another world away. So for us, if we had to buy something new for the house or buy a new car or go Christmas shopping, it was a day trip to Toowoomba. So Toowoomba was the big smoke.
When did you start playing?
Played from about 9 years of age in the under 5 stone school side. Played 5 stone, 6 stone at school competitions on the Downs, and then from under 12s onwards, the Melbourne Rams formed a junior club, and we played in the Toowoomba Rugby League in the juniors, so under 12s, 14s, 16s, 18s.
Have you always been a half?
Never. No, all my junior football I was a lock, second rower, and when I was 16, the coach and the president of the Melbourne Rams asked my parents if they could pick me in first grade at 16, which they agreed to. They didn't ask me, but that was fine. And to look after me, rather than put me at lock or in the forwards, they moved me to 5'8". So from 16, I played under 16s and first grade. Play under 18 some days as well. But so I went from, and I'd never played 5'8", so I ended up playing 5'8" from the time I was 16 just to keep me out of the middle of look after me a little bit at first grade level. And my debut, that strangely enough, was at 16 for the Maroons Rams, was at Athletic Oval in Toowoomba against Valleys from Toowoomba. The 5'8" for Valleys was Alan Smith, who was the current Queensland 5'8" at the time. 1976, I think it was. Yes.
And 5'8" in that first Origin team that forced Wally Lewis to play lock forward in his
correct.
first game. So that decision to play against men at the age of 16, that can either make or break, young men. It obviously helped you.
Yeah, it happens a lot in the country. Kids getting through at 16 and 17 and playing first grade and playing against men. And the rules in those days, there were
different.
rules, but they were loose rules. So yeah, you grow up pretty quickly and you learn to, the game. It's a physical game, and you learn that pretty quickly.
When did you first really get noticed, or when did you start thinking that you're a chance of maybe moving from Melbourne and the Darling Downs to head to that faraway town in Brisbane?
I never wanted to leave. As a kid, that's where your security is, and you don't have that sort of confidence and self-belief because the city's another world. So I made, as a 16-year-old, I made the Queensland schoolboys team. And I was just happy I'd played for Queensland. I made it again the next year, and the following year I made the 18 side with Wally Lewis. So we're Trades and Labour Cup. So I was captain of Toowoomba, and Wally was captain of Brisbane. The final was at Athletic Oval in Toowoomba, and we played against each other, and it was a close game. And Wally put up a bomb and scored late in the game, the game was close, which probably would have put Brisbane in front. And he was ruled offside. And, Wally was renowned for talking to referees, and he let loose on the referee, who was a local at the time, obviously. And but he was trying to explain to the referee that he couldn't be offside, he was the kicker, which was a fair point.
Fair point.
But the try was disallowed and we won the game. So, yeah, going back to that, so playing for Queensland, was a milestone for me and something that I really had my heart set on. I'd missed out as a primary school kid. I went to the trials and missed, but secondary, under 18s. I was pretty happy with myself, but looming large was what I was going to do with myself as a career. I'd been a reasonable student. I had a good TE score in those days. I had to do something with myself. Was I going to stay at home and become an electrician or something like that, a tradie? Or would I follow my girlfriend to Brisbane and go to Teachers College and become a teacher? Which is what happened. I went to Teachers College at Kelvin Grove, PE and Science, but I drove back every weekend to play for Maroons Rams in the Toowoomba competition the first year. At the end of that year, I had an approach from Dennis Ward, who was coaching Wynnum Manly, and my best mate at Teachers College played in Wynnum Manly for the club. So that suited me fine. So it was more or less a done deal that I would go to Wynnum Manly in the second year, because travelling forwards became a little bit arduous. So I used to sort of just train once a week with the team up there on the Friday night, play on Sunday and travel back. And I had a few cramps on the way driving back and that, which wasn't ideal. So I decided I should make the move and try to play in Brisbane.
So what happened to Wynnum? How come you didn't end up at Wynnum?
There's another guy who was at college, whose father, Noel Waldron, his father was a selector at Norths. He heard that, he knew I'd played Queensland 18s that year and that I was going to come to Wynnum. And he spoke to his dad, who spoke to Bob Bax, and I get a phone call from Bob Bax. Bob's had some contacts in Toowoomba that he sort of rang, and he was keen to talk to me. But my mind was made up, so I tried to discourage it and said, Bob, no, you'll be wasting your time. I'm really going to go to Wynnum, that will suit me. And he said, no, we'll just come and have a chat. So Bob can be quite persuasive. So I thought, well, I may as well go and have a chat to Bob, because I really don't know what to expect from Wynnum. I'm just going to sign whatever they put in front of me. So I go to Bob and we meet in the back bar at North's Devils, which is where Bob's that was always his office. And out came his letterhead, back of a coaster. Yeah, Bob always did his work on the back of a coaster. And he started writing numbers down, and this will get this, and wrote it all out neatly on a paper. If you decide to come to, if it doesn't work out when you go to Wynnum and you want to come to North, this is what we could do for you, and slipped it in my pocket. which I didn't know whether it was a good deal or a bad deal. And so the following week I go down to Wynnum and meet with their guys, and they explain what they can do. And I say, well, that's all sounds pretty good, and I want to come to you guys. But Bob Bax, I went over to, so I had a chat with Bob Bax at Norths last week, and his offer is substantially better. They said, oh, okay, well, go down and have a beer with your mate down the bar, give us 10 minutes and we'll reconsider. Which what happened, called me back up, and they moved the markers up a little bit, but it's still nowhere near what Bob had offered me. So I go back and sign with Norths. Once I got to know Bob Bax and you know, time rolled on, I realised that Bob he knew he was up against it, so he'd put in an excellent offer for somebody who, you know, was just never played at this level, which was over and above probably, you know, the norm, but he got the job done. And I had played I played 3 trials with Norths, and I go to Teachers College on the Monday, and my mate from Wynnum, his family got the newspaper, I didn't, delivered. He said, you're in the team for round 1. I said, what team? He said, Norths. I said, rubbish.
That's how you found out.
Yes, and I was, strangely enough, I was playing halfback. And I'd just moved from the forwards to 5'8" to accommodate my youth in the TRL competition, the Toowoomba Rugby League, and Bob's throwing me at halfback, and I'd never played halfback before in my life. So
good move.
Yes.
And we're talking about pre-Broncos coming into the NRL. We're talking about a very, very strong Brisbane Rugby League competition. Take us back. What was it like? Not only playing, but the crowds that you would get. You look at, you know, Davies Park and Bashup Park and Cougarai, etc., just packed to the rafters. What was it like?
Yeah, well, it was suburban grounds and more as district football. You know, I don't know whether I got here, but previously they had to live in the area to play for them, so they'd be at the back of district football. It built up, you know, a lot of local support, and local grounds were packed, and you know, going to Bishop Park, Bashup Park, which was affectionately known, or Davies Park, and Purtell Park was a terrible place to have to go and play, drive right out there to the west. But yeah, everyone had their home ground, and and Cougarai, of course, still to this day, you know, is the chook pen, as they call it. Yeah, so they all great grounds to play at, and the competition, as you rightly point out, was really strong. So I came in the late 80s, but if you cast your mind back to the late 70s, 78 was my first year, throw back to the mid 70s and the early 70s, there was players coming from Sydney to Brisbane to play, e.g. Tommy Bishop. Baxi brought Tommy Bishop.
John Sattler.
John Sattler came.
Clive Churchill coached there at Norths too.
Yeah, 59, Clive Churchill came up from South Sydney. So in those days prior to the 80s, it wasn't that uncommon for players to come from Sydney to play in the Brisbane competition. So it was very strong. And, you know, even the country league was very strong. But, you know, once the 80s hit and the poker machines sort of doing their work in Sydney and New South Wales, then the trend was obviously always south. And the beauty of that was we suffered for quite a while, but then, you know, that's why Origin was born.
Well, you were there for the birth. You didn't play in 80, but you did play soon after that. What was the feeling amongst the players at the time with the idea from Senator Ron McAuliffe that we're going to play State of Origin? Some have said they never thought that it'd get off the ground, that it was just a pipe dream. Where did you sit at the time with that?
Yeah, I was a little unsure because it was a new concept, and you just don't know how it's going to be received and what that would mean for you as a player. But you know, once it's that first game was played and Beatso, you know, ignited the crowd and the game by running out, and Beatso is such a admired figure in the game, particularly in Queensland. When he sort of took on the persona that he did and the importance and the inspiration for that first game, anyone who watched that, you know, had to be captured with the concept, particularly when Queensland won. And then obviously I was lucky enough to be involved in the one-off game in 81. So I played the second game, state game at Leichhardt Oval, where we got beaten in Sydney in 81. So I played the very last normal interstate game, and then played my first Origin game from the bench in 81, and of course then it went to a series and it just exploded into a great sporting event.
So when you were watching in 1980 and you saw Arthur Beetson with all the, the white stuff on the jersey and come out and the way the game was played, the intensity at which it was played and the reaction from the crowd, was your immediate reaction was, I want a part of that?
Yes, for sure. I wanted to be involved, yes. Everyone was, as you rightly, Wally grew up being a lock forward as well. Wally was in the middle of being transferred to be switched to 5'8", because so Alan Smith played the first one at 5'8", Wally at lock, but then in 81 he goes to 6. I went from lock to 6 in the bush, come down here, and I'm playing 5'8" for North. So Baxi picked me at 7 for the first 3 games. I played centre for the rest of that 78 season with Baxi. In 79. I go back to 5'8" under Graham Lowe, and I'm playing 5'8". So the best player, in the state is in 6. So I ended up playing 14 for a number of games. Origin 2, I was on the bench in 14, and then all the Brisbane games around that same time, I was 14. So I think I'm going to be stuck on the bench unless...
Because the bench was different in those days.
2.
It's not like there was no interchange.
No interchange.
You were not guaranteed of getting on the field.
No. 2 players, a forward and a back normally. And in 81 I was the reserve back and Normie Carr was the reserve forward. And I remember Normie, because he may have played in 80 as well. I don't know.
I think so, yeah.
I think he did. Anyway, he's on the bench, so we're sitting there watching the game, and New South Wales started quite well, and I think they scored the first try, or maybe even the first 2 tries. And, at the time, match payments in the BRL were like 200 a game, plus, you get bonuses for 5 games, 10 games or whatever. But 200 per game was sort of the win bonus. And for Origin, I think it was 1,200 or 1,500 a game to win this game, nothing for the loser. And when New South Wales scored, I was just happy to be there. I was excited just to be in the team, but Norm had his eyes on the 1,500. And every time they scored, he's going, "Oh, what are these blokes doing? They're blowing my money. They're blowing my money." Anyway, we ended up winning. Norm was really happy with the match payment.
So 1981 through to 86, you only missed 1 game, I think, in that you played 15 of the 16 you're eligible to play. Can you give us some understanding of the change or the evolution of Origin, whether it be the intensity, the way the players approached it, whatever it may be, from that 81 game, the 1-match series the last time, through to your last match in 86? How did you see Origin develop?
It was an exciting time for everybody, and particularly for the players, it being the focal point. But the thing that made it so exciting was the way the fans in Queensland embraced the concept. The fact that we won those first 2 one-off games, they got that really only charged the fans up, and we'd all lived through the 70s where we hadn't won a game, or very few wins at state level, and we were seeing Arthur Beetson and these good players, Rod Reddy's, come back and play against us that were Queenslanders originally. So I think the fans of Queensland Rugby League were hungry for success at state level, and it was a masterstroke from Ron McAuliffe to put the concept forward. But putting it forward and getting it accepted by the hierarchy in New South Wales and the ARL wasn't going to be easy. And obviously they got to the point where they introduced it in the one-off matches, and with Queensland having success in those 2 games, it really set it up. And the series in 82 was fantastic. With the crowd just being involved in the team. We were going to camp on the Thursday morning for the Tuesday night game. It was a Tuesday night game. And being in camp to start with was something new, because we all had jobs and we just used to being at home, going to training, going to games, going back home. It was all localised, so there was no need to go into camp. So to go into camp was exciting for the players, but once in there, just the way the public, as we moved around as a group in the city and in the, on the little bus that we had for the week driving around, just the response and the applause and the encouragement we got from fans in the street was really exciting. And then, of course, to go, I think we lost the first game in '82, and it was my first game, at halfback with Wally, and I thought, geez, I'm on the line here. I think I'll be lucky to get selected, And when they read my name out in game 2, I wasn't going to let that slip, and we won game 2. I thought I played quite well, and same with game 3, and away it developed. And having won the series in '82, '83, '84, New South Wales were really coming on board because they were getting a taste of the '70s, on the other end of the stick.
Was it the toughest footy you played?
Yeah, most intense, and it's fast, the fastest footy. It was just, the game just seemed to kick off, and next thing it's half time, next thing it's over. The 80 minutes would just go so quickly. And I remember in those early years, we couldn't, the crowd just erupted on every tackle, on every run for the first 10 or 15 minutes. So you couldn't hear each other calling, the ball or little plays or whatever around the ruck. So Wally and we developed just some hand signals for that early part of the game so that we could understand where we were going and what we were doing, because the crowd was just deafening. After that 15-minute mark, they'd sort of settle down a little bit. But every time, Queensland did something, a half break or a big tackle, the crowd would just erupt, and it was really inspiring stuff.
Well, it says something that, as I walked in here today to chat to you, Wally Lewis, who is here quite regularly, dragged me aside to make sure I mentioned the fact that he got you across to Valleys because he wanted you playing alongside him. What does it mean to you to have one of the greatest of all time say, mate, I want you to come to Valleys, I want to play with you more than just in Origin?
Yeah, it's a wonderful accolade. He is the best of all time. He's the best I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of players, and I've had to make judgment calls as a coach on players, at all levels. So, I've had a little bit of practice at it, and he's the best by quite a margin. He's outstanding. He's outstanding to play with. And for him we played a game, a Panasonic Cup game, must have been '81, and against North Sydney on a Wednesday night at Lang Park, and I was 14, because Wally was 6 and I was 6 at North, so I get picked on the bench. I was the reserve back again. Terry Saunders, who was a good little halfback at Wynnum Manly, he was also from the Darling Downs, Warwick or somewhere, I think, originally, but very quick and strong, Terry, so he was a good little player. Unfortunately, in the cool of the night, in the first 10 minutes, he's tweaked a hamstring and had to come off. So I go on and play half, even though I'd played 3 games of halfback at that stage, the first 3 in '78 when I came to Bobby Back's at Norths, and I hadn't played half since. So I go on and play half, the Kings at 5/8. We go on, and the game sort of just flows, and the combination between myself and Wally was, we never had a chance to practice it, but even when I went to Valleys the next year, it's not something we sat down and talked about or trained. It had its own life. We just sort of clicked as a pairing, and our communication was good. And so after we won that game at the Panasonic Cup game, and after in the sheds, he said to me, "What are you doing next year?" I said, "I'll be at Norths, mate. I love it there." He said, "Rat's retiring, Ross Strudrick. He's staying on as coach but retiring as a player. We need a halfback. I want you to come and be the halfback." I'm going, "Oh, I'm pretty happy where I am at Norths, although I'd love, So that developed even further, and with his encouragement, I did go to Bobby Bax and have a discussion around, I'm going to pursue this and have a look at it, but I'd rather stay here. And to Bob's credit, I explained to him, the offer that was coming from and the reasons behind it, that I think there was a chance, because Rossi Henrik, who's a good friend of mine, I'm a halfback at Norths. He had played a bit of Origin and 7, but it wasn't a sort of sewn down spot, and the King was keen for me to play as his club half, and I thought it was a good opportunity for me, but I was reluctant to leave Norths because I'd really enjoyed it there, and Bob had been so good to me, and Lowy, we'd had some success in '80 and won the comp. So it took a bit of convincing, but in the end Bob said, "No, 1, we can't match the money. 2, I think it's a good opportunity for you as well." so I went.
Good to be honest in that respect. And,
Yeah, champion goal.
And had a year at Valleys and then ended up at Redcliffe. But sadly, I suppose, from the outside, at the age of 27, 1986, an eye injury meant that you had to finish playing early. What impact did that have on you?
Yeah, it was a bit of a shock. I mean, it was a total accident. You know, we were at a bar and we were mucking around. It wasn't any aggression in it at all. It was a joke, actually, that someone made a joke and then only joking, only kidding, and grabbed me. And I had a empty pot glass in my hand at the time and we fell over because we grabbed. And when I fell down, my head came down on top of the glass. Strangely enough, you think if you did that and the glass smashed in the fall, you might have heaps of stitches in your face and all that. I had 2 stitches, which happened to be in the left eyelid. Unfortunately, there was a shard of glass that had pierced into the eye and gone all the way back to pierce the retina. Had it sort of stopped halfway into the eye, I would have had vision again, but it pierced the retina, which was then led to a detached retina, which then had to have an operation to save a bit of sight. So yeah, it was a decision. It was a fluke accident. Can happen in life, but yeah, once I got over it, I couldn't play because my peripheral vision and my coordination and perception of tracking of a football had all changed. It took a lot to retrain and get used to. So playing wasn't an option, so I had to accept retirement. The flip side, on the upside of that, is it did get me into coaching sooner than I otherwise would have. So I got into coaching within a couple of years, and that went okay for a while as well.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. You're in an elite group of having played for Queensland and coached Queensland. Can you explain or give some sort of insight into the different emotions when you're on the field and have some sort of control as opposed to being in the coach's box and having zero control?
Yeah, that's exactly the case. As a player, you get out there and you've got teammates, you've got support around you. Coaching's an isolated place. But it was a good challenge, It would have been difficult to walk away from football altogether because I'd been playing it since I was 9 years old, and I'd had, some great times and some good successes out of footy, and footy had been good to me. So coaching was a way of staying involved and giving something back. And coaching Origin though is an NRL level, and Origin there's a lot of pressure there. But I was pleased to have done it. Could have turned out a little bit better, yes, but you've got to give these opportunities a go when they turn up, and you give it your best, and if that falls short, you've got to accept that. Well,
you coached Norths to a premiership as well. Is there a different feeling as a coach winning a premiership as to a player?
Yes, they're both very satisfying. I think as a player, you've got these teammates around you, and it's more of a group party. And as an individual coach, you're involved with that, but you're not playing, and whilst you get on great with your players and all of that sort of thing, you've still got a separation, I think, between as a coach and a player, a little. So yeah, they're all rewarding in their own ways, but it's certainly different.
This might be a really difficult and maybe unfair question to ask. Over your career, you've represented your country, you've played 15 Origin matches, won premierships as a player and coach, involved with one of the big clubs in Sydney, Eastern Suburbs coaching there, and also at the Melbourne Storm, particularly in a development stage for the Melbourne Storm as a coach, but also back here in Brisbane with the North Devils and fostering young players through Norths to become superstars and future immortals of the game. What do you see as your greatest achievement in the game?
Well, individually, every player that laces on a boot wants to win the competition. So winning a BRL competition in 1980 when it was really, really strong was a wonderful achievement, and to be a 21-year-old captain was, quite remarkable. Things, fell into place for that to happen, but that's something that I'm really proud of. Question again? Where I was going?
What do you see as your greatest achievement?
Oh, right, yes. So as a player, winning a competition, playing for your state was a big thing for me, and being part of Origin was really, early days was really special, and then obviously playing for your country is right up there. So those three things as a player, not everyone gets to do, and I'm really fortunate to have ticked all of those. But giving back to the game once you're out of it as a player, so through coaching or administration, one of the biggest challenges and most intriguing things is when I had a call. So I was working at Redcliffe at the time in administration, and for the footy club, the Dolphins, and I had a call from Chris Johns and John Rebo asking if I'd be interested in setting up a pathway system and a recruitment system for the Melbourne Storm in Brisbane. And like, that wasn't on the radar, but it was, gee, how's that going to work? It was just something that had never been done in the game before. So you got, the NRL club and team in Melbourne, and we're going to set up a feeder system and a recruitment system in Brisbane. I understood the need for that because they didn't have the structure or the level of competition locally in Melbourne to support what they needed to do. So it was either going to be Sydney or Brisbane. And for me to have that first opportunity, they said, we'd prefer it to be in Brisbane and we'd like you to do it for us. So that was, a really nice gesture. And I was a little unsure how all that was going to go, but I was ready for another challenge in the game. And going back to Norths to do that role for Melbourne allowed me to go back to coach Norths as well. So I had a dual role there, coaching the Queensland Cup side and also running the Melbourne program and putting in a system, because basically it was up to me to come up with a system, a recruitment system and a development pathway for young players to eventually go through Norths Devils to the Melbourne Storm.
It worked okay.
Well, there was a lot of hurdles. We had to first of all get dual registration through the BRL and the QRL, and Kevin Brash and Ross Livermore were good allies. They helped get that through and could see, this could be a benefit. And at the time, Brisbane Rugby League had fallen right away, and some clubs were financially distraught because, the National League had come in, the Broncos, and they'd sort of all the attention and all the monies had gone to that level of football. And the Sydney clubs were still having reserve grades and that sort of stuff. So they had this good level of football and structure of football in Queensland, but it was a bit homeless. It had no sort of direct role in the scheme of the game. So the light bulb came on for me that this could be the new role for Queensland Cup. It slides in underneath the NRL as a feeder system, as Melbourne had to happen with Melbourne. And if that could happen across the country, this would have a brand new role for Brisbane football and Queensland football. And clubs like the Devils and the Dolphins and the Tigers in Brisbane and Valleys and that, who didn't quite make it, Valleys, West's brothers, they all folded, so it was too late for them. But these clubs could have a role in a vertical structure from junior football through to open grade, through to Queensland Cup, through to National League. So instead of the game being, isolated with each NRL club having their own sort of system underneath them, the game comes together and we have a vertical pathway for players, for coaches, for administrators to work their way through the game. And having seen that come to life across the board, and for Melbourne and the Devils to be so successful, the Devils were on the way out financially until that happened. So that now they're a very successful club in their own right, and they've got a future. But it future-proofed the Devils through Melbourne, and then we obviously things happened after 10 years. We went to the Broncos, and now they're with the Dolphins. But that system, it works across the country, where certain levels of football can slide in under other levels and be part of a vertical feeder system. Great challenge, something that I was lucky enough to be sort of the innovator of through the need for Melbourne. And that's probably the thing that I am proud of most outside of player, once I was either a coach or administration, which I did for 25 years after I finished playing.
Who had the biggest influence on your career?
Bob Bax and Jack Gibson, Graham Lowe, those sorts of guys. Frank Stanton was good. He was excellent. But having again, I'm very fortunate in the game for someone come in as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old to Norths and bump into Bob Backs. He's the very first super coach. His record is outstanding in the old BRL system. But other than that, he was just a very streetwise man to be involved with. He was a sharp operator, very good with his footy. And so I was very privileged to have known Bob for many years. And then after a year coaching, 2 years of coaching the Colts at Redcliffe with a couple of comps, coaching their first grade side at Redcliffe Dolphins in the Queensland Cup in 1990, I get a call from Jack Gibson, who's looking for a new coach at the Roosters. And Bob had spoken with Jack, as had Wayne Bennett at the time, unbeknownst to me. And I wasn't quite ready for Sydney coaching, having had limited experience as a coach. But how do you say no to that opportunity? Mm. And I went down there and Jack was outstanding. 4 great years with Jack and learned a lot. Bob Backs, Jack Gibson, outstanding influences, and how I feel very privileged to have had the opportunity to work with both.
What do you reckon, Mark, that young kid hauling logs with the old man up on the Darling Downs would think if someone told him then that he was going to play 15 games of origin for Queensland, 7 tests for Australia, over 100 BRL games, win a premiership as a player and a coach, and do what you did with the Melbourne Storm? What do you reckon that kid would think?
He'd be pretty happy, but it's unbelievable that it panned out that way. As I said, I loved the game as a kid. I just wanted to play for Queensland. After I've seen that Queensland emblem at Lang Park, I wanted to play at Lang Park. All the rest, that all happened, and I look back on it, and I feel very fortunate. The game's been very, very kind and good to me.
Well, Fog number 22, Mark Murray, congratulations on a wonderful career, and thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Fog's Queenslander podcast. If there's a Fog you want to hear from, leave a comment to let us know. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos.